Night Pitch Episode 7. Justin Wick, Evan Johnson. Back in business, once again talking about some crazy throwing details when it comes to the chance where you actually have to do literally whatever it takes to get your throwing in on a certain day. And Evan, this thought was instigated because of trying to get my throwing in during COVID. I can think of trying to find empty racquetball courts that I would just destroy baseballs up against the concrete because it was hard to find people to throw at certain hours and all kinds of places were locked. I can think of the snowstorms where I've had to set up like a net inside a public gym in a space that probably wasn't equipped for throwing, but you got to do what you got to do. I can think of parking garages that I've done before. I can think of like the back of a Home Depot where you're getting all sorts of crazy looks. So this is something that you certainly don't ever want to run into, but I think this is a good discussion point is when it comes time to, are you going to get your throwing in or not? Sometimes you have to do what some would consider particularly uncharacteristic. So Evan, you've had a pretty rich baseball career, of course, growing up in Iowa, where the weather is particularly cold in certainly a lot of situations. You've played all over the country. You've seen these situations. You've been used in a lot of different capacities as a pitcher. What has those moments led you to when it comes to a chance that you really need to get your throwing in and maybe the accessibility isn't quite what it should be?
Well, today's a perfect example. It's 30 degrees, 20 mile per hour winds. It was an 18-degree wind chill, and we're throwing outside. We started this morning. We went to this gym, and there's track, and they were doing high jump practice, so couldn't throw in there. Then we couldn't get into the other indoor facilities, so we couldn't throw there. So I looked at my brother, and I was like, time to white knuckle it. Here we go. So we went outside through 18 wind chill. Well, you're right. COVID was a weird scenario. We would go down the list of, we'd throw at certain places or certain parks or certain fields. And then as we got kicked off of those and told we couldn't go, then we would cut them off the list and we just keep going down our list. And we lasted doing that for a long time. So
when you had to rotate them out because you kept getting kicked off and you're saying we need to switch it up so much so we don't get suspicious. I think I was in the exact same boat. I can think of, there was a high school nearby for where I was, and I was in Denver at the time, just training, playing ball. And when COVID hit and I knew that the weather was going to be very difficult to get my throwing in with all the gyms closed, I saw a snowstorm was coming. My mom and dad live in Phoenix right now. And I remember calling them and telling them, in order to get what I need as a baseball player, I'm going to need to come to some warmer climates. So that was the entire motive for why I hunkered down in Arizona during COVID. And it was strictly because of my throwing schedule. And I can think of, there was a high school that I knew their campus was closed and you couldn't do anything there, but I needed to get off the mound one day, which that was kind of the culprit of, are you going to build a mound yourself and try to figure out where to put it? Or are you going to keep trying to rotate around, finding where you can get off the rubber of some sort? So there was like a junior varsity field that didn't have a fence around it, but they had the golf cart patrol. And I got kicked off at one time as I was trying to scope it out, seeing if I could score some favors. But it turned into, I know that if I am going to throw a bullpen today, my best chance is going to be waking up at 5 a.m. in pitch black as I warm up for about an hour. When I get hot is when I scheduled when the sunrise was going to be. So literally the first minute of sunrise, I scheduled everything as if that was the first pitch of the game for my on-field warm-ups. I got 10 pitches in, and then somebody in a golf cart came over and told me I had to leave. So I think that, I remember I told him, I said, all right, I am going to leave. Is it okay if I leave in about 15 minutes and I just really take my time picking up my stuff? But I'm going to disguise this as picking up my stuff means I need to throw about 15 more pitches right now. So they closed their eyes. They were kind of cool with it, but that got crossed off my COVID list of throwing places, and then you had to rotate it around. But I know when you need to modify certain things, that this certainly ties into the differences in plyo walls of, I played in a game at the Field of Dreams in Iowa, and there's not exactly a plyo wall. That's one thing that, Ray Kinsella kind of overlooked when he was putting up the Field of Dreams. But when you need to get clever, I think those levels of innovation are really cool because you can really evaluate the buy-in of certain people. I'm not trying to self with that necessarily. But as far as when you've needed to get clever, and maybe not so much in a throwing capacity for just, playing catch with a partner, but the other elements of, maybe you don't have a chain link fence to clip your bands onto. Maybe you don't have a plyo wall and you kind of got to bite the bullet and risk throwing it up against some brick that might damage your plyos. Is there ever anything where you've had to get super innovative to get something done that led into your throwing?
Yeah, I mean, I've thrown plyos with a partner a lot, especially over COVID, because we didn't, there wasn't a plyo wall wherever we were at that particular day. So we just spread out, go like 30, 40 yards apart and throw plyos. It rolls, they pick it up, they throw it back the other way. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of it here, like in Iowa, is driving. Like, think, okay, we can try this field, but it's an hour and a half away, so let's suit up and go. And then you get there, and somebody tells you to get off, So then you're like, oh crap, where do we go next? So then you find yourself in just random places. I remember I stopped in Stanhope, Iowa, which is a really, really, really small town in Iowa. And it had a baseball field. It was kind of a small one. And we were playing catch on it because it was one of the only places we knew that we could get on a field to throw. And I had thrown a ball that tipped off my catch partner's glove and like broke a window at this random little town in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't know what to do because there's nobody around because it's such a little town. So I just left a note on the window like, hey, just call me. Here's my number. I'll replace your window. But I mean, we had to get so creative with a lot of the stuff that we were doing because it's just, and I think it's funny that when you're talking about, hey, oh yeah, I'll get off, but can I get off in like 15 minutes? And then the person has a second to think about it and they're thinking like, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, I guess it really doesn't matter, but sure, and then you keep throwing it. It's like, okay, well, why did I even tell me to get off? So there's a lot of scenarios like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people telling us we can't go places.
I think it's funny too if you put somebody in a position to say no or to like in position, and I pretty much marketed myself as going, you're not going to see anyone else here that's literally standing on a mound the instant the sun comes up. Like, you're really going to the whole reason I'm here is to avoid you. Like, that was the entire premise. But I don't really want to blow past the window story. Like, you mentioned you left your phone number. Did they ever call you back, or did they just kind of take it? I mean, was there ever any, like, ulterior side of this?
Nope, never got a phone call. Which I felt bad because nobody's there. It's a town where if you drive through, it doesn't look like there's a lot of people that live. Now, there's cool little shops and stuff, and they have Watermelon Day, and they have a big festival and stuff, and it's cool. But I never thought I would throw at this field in Stanhope, Iowa. I've driven through it a lot, but never thought I would throw there, and never thought I would break a window with a baseball in Stanhope, Iowa. But I was glad they never called me because, I didn't have to pay for a window, but I'm surprised they didn't because I would, if I walked over, they'd be like, how in the heck does this window get broken? Nobody's playing baseball out here. I guarantee it.
That's just the definition of being just a gritty, hard-nosed, nasty overachiever, and then being a good human on top of that. But that's just, I think of different instances, particularly involving, we started touching on this, of when people are witnessing what's going on. And it's something that I've always thought is strange, particularly in the baseball community, is it's not abnormal to see somebody bring out like a set of golf clubs and just be hitting balls, or, dribbling a basketball and playing at a local court. I understand that more often than not, the familiarity of seeing something or recognizing it, it's confined to the actual play surfaces that you see it performed on. But when you're a baseball player and you realize the upkeep that goes into field maintenance of, somebody stands on the mound and throws some pitches, that means somebody's probably going to have to clay the mound afterwards. Or the way that, trying to take care of different grounds crews, making sure that the grass is taken care of. I think that it's always interesting to follow along of the accessibility of the sport itself. Of, you take a basketball to the local park and you don't need to rake the hardwood when you're done playing. It's just right there and you keep rolling it out and doing what you got to do. So I know of different places that when I've really needed to throw, and I can remember when I was in high school, my travel team in the summer, we played a tournament in Los Angeles, and I wanted to stay pretty diligent to my throwing routine. Of my day before a start, I would throw to about 90 feet, It would be kind of a touch and feel. I'd get a touch of all of my pitches from a distance. I'd work a very abbreviated flat ground, but I was very diligent to, all of my throwing days, but especially the day before, just because I didn't want to leave anything to chance. And I wanted that to be the day that I took a lot of positive thoughts into the next day. So I was the opening game starter for this particular tournament, and we landed at about 7 p.m. There was a patch of grass near the hotel that we were staying in, and it was right next to a highway. Like, I mean, by highway, I'm talking like somebody might have jumped out through the barbed wire fence if you weren't careful. So I could think of, trying to get teammates of mine going into a group chat. I'm not trying to call out 17-year-old teammates of mine, but I remember I ended up going to the bottom floor of a parking garage, scared as hell. The only ball that I had was a big league ball because we got our team bucket. I've got one ball just in case I need it. Well, I had this big league ball, and I realized that I need to throw and I need to get my rest for tomorrow. So I absolutely destroyed a big league ball on the concrete wall of a parking garage. And so I remember thinking to myself walking away, I had a decent throwing day. It was okay. I mean, you start chasing after balls that roll past you if it takes a weird bounce on the pavement beneath you. But, I think of those instances. I remember in the back of a Home Depot parking lot one time, or the back of the storefront itself where all the loading docks were, surrounded by pallets and making that work. And I know of, holidays, especially when I was coming back from Tommy John surgery, I didn't want to miss a rehab day because I felt like any one day was going to delay my inevitable return to an actual game setting. So I remember throwing a bullpen on New Year's Eve or on Christmas Eve with everything closed, and it was up against a couple like pallets and just some old netting that I found, which, I mean, it's a good soul searching moment when you realize that you spend more time setting up this just absolutely atrocious looking configuration as opposed to actually throwing. So, there's all sorts of innovation that I feel that goes into it, but at the same time, ideally you don't question yourself as a human at the end of it. Ideally you feel better about it, but that's when you have a bad throwing day after going to all of those provisions, that's just the absolute worst.
Oh, I know. I've thrown in a parking garage as well. We threw with like 5 of us in a parking garage, playing catch like up and down the ramp. We took turns going down the ramp, to being the guy that was throwing down the ramp. Yeah, I remember driving to Florida with my dad because I was going to stay with him in Florida, and I have so many stories about trying to throw down in Florida because of this one park. But we stopped at a hotel, and I was throwing my plyos off of the dumpster. It was like 11:30 at night. We just stopped at the hotel. I was like, I gotta make sure I do something today. So I went out and threw plyos off the dumpster next to the hotel, and I was just thinking, I bet there's people sleeping right now, but I don't care. I'm gonna throw these plyos. And it was so loud off the back of a metal dumpster.
Oh my goodness. That's a really good point too, because I can remember, especially like in travel settings or in summer ball, of whenever I would go pulling into a hotel, and I still do this, which is hilarious. As I'm pulling into a hotel, I will just subconsciously look around and I will think to myself, what could double as a plyo wall if I actually need this? And I can't unthink this just because my mind is conditioned to do this. But, I can remember driving around my hometown and thinking to myself, yeah, I've thrown over there a couple times just because I needed a place to throw. This is the way we get it done. But,
Yeah.
I can recall, especially like the early phases of my professional career I get me not a professional player, but a professional employee, call it a writer, call it a broadcaster, or whatever operation side. I remember I flew in to cover the Rockies for a series. They played the Braves in late 2021, and I still threw at the time. I mean, I still kind of throw now just because I like doing it. But I remember I didn't have such a diligent throwing routine because I don't do it. That's not for a living thing anymore. But I still had my plyos. So, I felt like such a mess. I'm literally walking into Coors Field with one bag that I just flew in this morning, and half of the bag is J-bands and plyos. I'm a reporter at this point, and I still have this. But I can recall, checking into a hotel, and I just needed to clear my head after traveling that whole day, that I went into an alleyway, and I'm throwing plyos, and I've got a folded towel on the ground to try to keep it somewhat clean. But, I think that it's difficult because you can't unsee that after you've really committed yourself into it. And I don't want this episode to turn into the reason I was hesitant to bring up this topic is because I don't want this to sound like I'm putting myself on a pedestal of look at what we've done to do whatever it takes. But, I think in terms of just being a good innovator and recognizing the buy in that goes into this is when it no longer becomes I'm doing this because I feel like I have to, but you're doing it because it's like a fundamental need of this is what I need to do to feel the fulfillment that I'm after. I know that's a huge reason that I kept throwing even after I was done competitively playing in many capacities, just because that was where you found peace in what it is that you do. And, you know, adapt the movement is medicine type of thing that it's hard to kick a habit that has taken I mean I hate to call it a habit because it's not necessarily bad I suppose, but I can think of some obscure things that it's really difficult to shake this understanding even years down the road. And that's part of the reason that, you see such a tight knit community of baseball players, not only while they're playing, but even beyond. And that's, the generations to see how it develops. I think that's one of the coolest things.
Yeah, I think about it sometimes now that I've been playing for a little while, and some of the things that I would do to make sure I felt comfortable. Some of the places I would throw to make sure I felt like I got work in was just total eyewash. Like because you can go, like I remember throwing in, just random environments where the return on my investment for the amount of time that I put in trying to figure out how to throw may not have been anything in comparison to like if I had a good environment to throw. So now I kind of think about it where like, okay, I'm flying all day today. I get in at, 1 o'clock in the morning. How am I going to throw? Well, why don't you structure your days up to that point to be where that's an off day? And why don't you feel comfortable taking that as an off day? Because the return on your investment for that is super low. If all you can do is, throw plyos in the parking garage or throw plyos off a dumpster, it's like I should have just structured it to where that hotel stop was an off day instead of go throw plyos at a dumpster at midnight. But I think the motivation for me to do that was all just to feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting to see how people find peace in what it is that they're doing. If you need that to give you the forward momentum, or if you feel like you're kind of slipping in your routines and this is something that you can really look forward to. I completely agree of you get to the end of a travel day and the last thing you want to do is something like that. But not only in that moment, but all the hours leading up to of, you're boarding a plane and you're thinking to yourself, as soon as we land, I need to find a place to do this. And if you could really just escape that, and I think of, not that it's a negative thought because it's all meant to propel you forward, but the subconscious anxiety that stems out of this is something that I don't think many people really recognize in the wake of this. And I think that, a prime example that I can recall of when I was coming back from Tommy John surgery, I had spreadsheets of exercises every single day from when I started the throwing program to when I pitched in my first game. And I did this to hold myself accountable and keep everything going. I can remember getting back to college the first day back from Thanksgiving break as I'm nursing my elbow back. And I had a delayed flight. I had class that day because I flew in early in the morning. I had to push things back. We had conditioning that morning. Other types of situations from that Sunday to Monday of it was just catching up with me and it was a mess. And then I can recall needing to go get groceries because I didn't want to not fuel myself and starve and all of these other things. But it ended up going, I'm in the fitness center at my apartment complex at 9 o'clock at night, finally, laying on top of a yoga ball, holding 4-pound dumbbells that I carried in this like grocery bag all the way down there. And at that point, I was thinking to myself, I really could have afforded, just like you mentioned, restructuring the days. So I look back on that day thinking, that's kind of a badge of honor of doing whatever it takes. But then I think to myself, it wasn't exactly doing whatever it takes in the scope of keeping myself mentally clear or giving me the clarity that I needed to be at my best. And it was no longer based upon, am I doing the right thing? Like, am I committing 100% what I have to this? Because in that moment, I wasn't capable of committing 100% just because I was as tired as I was. So I like that too, because that's a message that I think really needs to be preached in a discussion like this of, sometimes the eyewash of throwing in a parking garage just simply isn't worth it. But I think that, we talked about the COVID discussion too, of when it suddenly becomes the only reality. And I think about, the accessibility of the game itself. This is something that you and I have talked at length about, of when you have no other choice, when it comes down to, are you going to do this or not? And I think some of the coolest comeback stories are, players that need to get an off-season job, and the only time that they can get their throwing is at 4:30 in the morning, where they just power through and do something like this. So I want to talk a little bit about, your progression. And I think you can attest to this growing up in a cold weather climate, especially in the winter times. Has there ever been like a consistent schedule that has demanded for you to just make some unforeseen crazy provisions to get all your work in?
Well, when it's cold, you try to work with that as best you can. And from people from other places might not do the same things we do here, like we did today, which was throw in 18 wind chill. They might be like, dude, you're crazy. But also, just with the way that Iowa is, there's not a lot of indoors. There's not a lot of places to go indoors. And a lot of those places that you can go indoors to throw, you're locked out of because there's a paywall or whatever, or it's busy or it's full or this or that. And you might not have the time to get in there, during that time. But I know that a lot of times for me, it requires a lot of driving, pre-planning and driving. Like, it's not so crazy in the places that we go, but I need to figure out the week before each day, where can I throw inside? At what time and for how long? And how long is it going to take me to get there? When do I need to leave? That kind of thing. Whereas other people, they might live nearby the university that they went to, or they might live in a larger, metro area where there's a lot of indoors where they could go and, work a deal with whoever owns it. But a lot of, like we were just saying, a lot of the stuff to be able to get it in is pre-planning. You're going to set out how you're going to get your throwing in before the week even starts, depending on what you got to do or where you can go.
Yeah, and I think that, mapping it out, especially in season, of when the fields are actually available. And I think this is kind of the unsung joy of, the team settings when you're in a traveling group of people that are like-minded and are really trying to make the same provisions that you are. I know that, especially in the cold weather climates of me growing up in Colorado, I admit I was more a little bit in a metro area of there was some resources available. I can recall my junior and senior year of high school, November, December, and January, I would throw at 6 o'clock in the morning, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and it was about a half hour away from my house. I would get my throwing in. Sometimes I didn't even have time to shower. Just I would go straight to my first hour math class as soon as I was done throwing, 30 minutes away. And I think of the change in perspective, and I touched on this talking about sometimes it is an eyewash provision if you're just kind of burning yourself out. But I can recall I was able to structure my entire day of, some days I was going to bed at 7:30 at night because I wanted to commit myself to that next day of throwing as best as I could. So I think of moments in my particular career where it was a turning point of, I'm really taking this serious and this is really what I want to do. Is one, I was seeing the results out of it, and I realized the progression of, I was working with a fantastic coach at those facilities and I was really getting what I felt like I needed. But I was also operating with the peace of mind of, not only am I getting these results, but now I'm allowing it to kind of take over my life in a positive sense because I've found what I really want to commit myself to. So I get that there's a lot of angles on this, that a lot of players are going to find this within. And I also think that it's cool that this isn't just exclusive to baseball. You find people in different fields that have a similar provision for whatever it is, and you find that passion and perseverance across the board. So we find a way to get it done, man. We find a way to get these as well. So I guess that's always a good sign, despite whatever roadblocks we have. I guess episode 7, I probably shouldn't speak that definitively this soon, but we're still pumping them out.
That's right.
We're doing what we got to do, my friends. Evan, I do want to ask one final thing of, like, severe weather. Of if there's an absolute disaster of a storm, or we've talked about extreme cold, but I'm thinking as far as like the rain, of that the rainstorm is coming and it's just going to be a torrential mess. Has there ever been a moment where you've had to rush your throwing just to get it done in any capacity?
Oh yeah. I remember, this is funny because this is not recent at all. This is when I was really, really young. And there's a saying that in Iowa that the saying goes, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, because the change is so often. We had a week the past couple weeks where it was 30 degrees and 80 degrees within the same week of a high. So I remember I was a kid, and my dad would always take me and my brother to the field next to our house to hit his grounders and stuff after he came home from work. Well, we were walking home from the field, and we weren't necessarily practicing. This wasn't a rush, but this is just the first thing that came into my mind. We heard behind us, we saw a cloud, and we heard behind us rain, and it was pouring. But I'm not kidding you, from like me to the camera away, there was pouring rain, and then it was completely dry, and it was moving toward us. Right, so we just started sprinting with all of our gear, and we can hear the rain like behind us, and we can see the wall of rain like coming toward us. And I just remember that so vividly because it was the weirdest thing, because we had seen it coming, but we just started running. I mean, there's been plenty of scenarios where, like, it's going to rain at this time, so you pre-plan. But sometimes in Iowa, you're sitting there and you're throwing, and you see a big old black cloud, and you hear the tornado sirens go off. Nobody's familiar with tornado sirens, right? You hear the tornado sirens go off, and you're like, okay, we got to get out of here, right? And then you just rush it, and you're done, and then that's it for throwing that day. And it's crazy how baseball just almost having to be outside to get the work in, because you need so much distance, right? Like, we're talking a football field of distance to get some of the work in that you want to get in. And you're at such a mercy of the weather and the facilities around you, what you have access to. So, I mean, basketball is the same way, but there's a lot more indoor gyms than there are indoor baseball facilities that have the length and the size that you need to be able to get your work in.
You just got to hope that those inconveniences don't come on the bullpen day. Like, whenever, as long as those days go unscathed, that means that it's a pretty good setup right there. All sorts of business to adapt to. And hopefully this applies for people all across the country. And hopefully this message resonates with the people that are in the warm weather climates right now, just realizing how fortunate they truly are just to simply walk outside and throw. That's something that I think is very underappreciated in many capacities, and I can attest to it both. I've been in the warm side, I've been in the cold side, but you never know what you're going to run into, and as long as you've got some place to get the job done and some place to do it consistently, that's all you can ask. Hopefully this shapes a better understanding for people to be grateful for what they do have. And even if that's just a concrete wall or some empty town in Iowa where you accidentally break a window and you walk out unscathed, that seems like a pretty good time right there too. We are going to take a short break. We'll come back with some other interesting nuggets as always. Absolute pleasure to be bringing this to you. This is Night Pitch Episode 7. Power Minute, Justin Wick. Here to talk about Leverage Index. Invented by Tom Tango, shout out to the GOAT. Leverage Index tells you how important a situation in a baseball game is, and it's based on how much win probability can change during any given plate appearance. This is where the term high leverage situation comes from. Big situations have high leverage. Leverage Index is generated by the number of outs, runners on, score, and inning, and an average or neutral situation has a value of 1. Any situation greater than 1 has higher than average leverage, while anything below is less valued. Generating these numbers is a different animal. Fortunately, they are already generated for us. You can find these numbers on the classic tables, or you can find them on win probability charts, just like the ones that Fangraphs puts out for every MLB game. If you're curious who was up in the most clutch moments, take a look at the tallest leverage index bars, and it will tell you everything that you need to know. If you want to sell a lot of jerseys, or get free dinner, or have your own statue, or something cool like that, make sure you play really well when the leverage index is high. Welcome back, my friends. Picking up right where we left off about being in situations where you got to do whatever it takes. Evan, I know we've had plenty of discussions throughout our career of the obscure things that some people maybe swear by in their development. Maybe some people don't care about things at all. And also the financial restrictions that often falls upon not everybody can just prop up a TrackMan unit on the wall. Not everybody can even get a radar gun at certain instances. So we've had this conversation, I know, in different elements, but I think that now is definitely a good time to revisit this. If somebody gives you a set amount of dollars, let's just say, for the sake of us kind of expanding on this, let's say somebody handed you $2,000. You got 2 grand, and you don't have any tools of, all right, yes, you've got your glove and you've got your baseballs. You've got the bare bones of, as a pitcher, that's the way you go. We can even expand this into hitting of, let's say you've got your baseballs and you've got your tee. You've got the rock bottom, but you have $2,000 to commit to anything that you need to feel like it'll take you to the next level of performance. What would be, not only how would you spend your $2,000, but what would be the first thing that you would commit to?
Oh man, so I got baseballs and a glove. I have the bare bones. I have baseballs and
Yeah.
a glove, right? Okay, I think I'm spending $1,000 of that $2,000 on a Stalker Pro. Just a regular radar gun. And that's a big chunk. And the reason I put that much money, that much of my $2,000 on a Stalker Pro radar gun is because you get feedback while you're throwing. I might even throw a couple hundred on there too to get a display screen. So I can see while I'm playing catch what kind, like I get immediate feedback on how hard that throw was. Especially if you're looking at velo.
That's like honestly a tremendous point. I didn't expect you were going to pull this one out to begin with. I thought you were going to talk about, yeah, I'll get like $40 J bands, or I'll get some wristway. Like, I mean, you're literally taking up over half of the budget right away.
Yep, that's first thing.
I respect it. Yeah, I think that honestly, when you recognize how big of a tool that truly is, and I can think of, throughout my training of when you realize there was an actual display board of a velocity read, like how quickly that can shape, not only when you're getting max intent, and I mean, I understand, the predispositions to radar guns is how much you can light it up. I think of, my sub-maximal intent days of there might be a day where I'm throwing just light and easy, and I say to myself, I don't want that number to go over 75. Like literally, and I can accurately say I have tangible evidence that shows that I backed off of my throws and I worked on what I needed to work on today. So I think of, especially when you're a pitcher and you depend so much on feel, if you feel really good on a recovery day, you may subconsciously be getting into it a little bit more than you need to. So I think of, as far as the diligence of, you have objective bits of information telling you this is everything that you need to do, and this is the actual output of that gun isn't going to lie to you. Not only that, it's not going to lie to you about what your max velocity is. It's not going to lie to you about showing how much you're backing off on a given day. So I don't disagree. I think that, I'm also preconditioned to just carrying a lot of things to the field, and I'd get really insecure about having to commit to that without the other things that I've sworn by for quite a while. So I think of, things that I've used, and I admit that I carry some personal bias to this just because I used these for as long as I did. I always swore by the crossover symmetry bands, and the full set of those is easily $300 or $400. But I think about, the daily practice of, that turned almost into my form of meditation of realizing, I believed in the studies, I trusted in everything that they had published, and realizing that it was differences in resistance. I know that some people swear by the J-band routine, and I think that's really cool too. I would probably take my own bias into that and go there. I think of overall activation of what I felt like I needed to get ready to go. I started really leaning away from just static and dynamic or static style stretches and actually implementing resistance bands of crossover symmetry has their hip halos that they use. And I know you can use it with just like a normal ankle band going through that particular protocol, but those are, I just did some serious product placement if anybody's watching right there. Goodness gracious. I mean, I swore by those for my shoulders and for my lower half just because I felt like that really got me ready to go. And it wasn't just are you feeling loose and you feel like you can start moving around? It felt like a true integral activation form of, I know that's probably $400 of the budget, but just feeling ready, I think, is such a game changer for being ready to go. So I think about, I don't want to kind of step on your toes. Let's say you have, how much let's come up with an accurate number of, all right, $1,000 for the radar gun. Let's say $250 for the board. Now that we've got the staple taken care of, let's say you have $500 to $750 remaining. What direction would you go with what's left?
Okay, so I just want to split this up too. Your first purchase would be the crossover symmetry, right?
That would be mine. The bands, yes.
Okay, so we'll go back and forth. So mine was the stalker and the display
Oh,
screen. Yours was the crossover, so I'm at about $1,200, and you're at about, I have $800 remaining, and you have $1,600 remaining.
Let's go like 17. Yeah, it's probably
Okay.
about 1,700.
Okay. My second purchase now would be a set of pliers. It's probably like
Yeah.
what, $80. So let's just round it off at an even, it's like 1,300. So I got $700 left. Because the display screens, I'm gonna have to buy a tripod, and I'm gonna have to buy the little thing that goes on the tripod to hold the gun and everything. So 1,700. So then, I want to hear your second purchase now.
All right, well, now I'm second guessing it all because I think about how good of a tool the radar gun is. And for the purpose of making this an expansive discussion, I don't want to take the cop out and go with the radar gun. So I think what I'll twist this on its head just to further the conversation. I'm going to go with the Oates Specialty shoulder tube. And I'm going to do that as far as feeling ready to go. I think of what that thing really provided for me and just the blood flow and the circulation side of, I felt like that got my arm really conditioned and really ready to move. I felt like the crossover bands do a great job of getting the blood flow more stimulated and, particularly focusing on the strength side of, yes, they have their activation series that they do. They've also got the sides and the plyometric ways of going about it. I think of incorporating some sort of rhythmic warm-up or some sort of movement-based getting ready to move. I think of, again, this is my own predisposition because I've used it as long as I have, but I remember going on road trips. Maybe we were flying somewhere and I couldn't bring a shoulder tube with me. I would take a green plyo and I would shake the sand inside as if it was a shoulder tube, but I don't think anything really replicates the real thing. And again, this is just because I used it for as long as I did. So if it was 5 or 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't pick this, but I'm letting my own conditioned bias trickle in, assuming that if I had to start fresh, I would want to build back everything that I have already built to this point. So my first pick would be the crossover bands. My second, call it $100. That means I got about 1,600 of my budget remaining, and that radar gun is looking extremely tempting now. Goodness gracious.
That's what I'm curious about, is if you buy all these things and you still have enough money left to get a radar gun. Even if there's no display screen, it does hook up to your phone, and it does announce it. So you can put headphones in and hear the velo come in through your headphones as you're throwing. So, great.
That's a good point.
I just keep selling this tool to you guys as like, if you have the money to get one, even if it's a pocket, just get one, because you need that feedback right away, and if you're trying to build velo, then you should probably be seeing velo every time you throw a baseball at max intent, right? So with that being said, even though
you're only going to be seeing, you're only seeing $300 though. So now let's see where else we're going to go.
So now I have, how much money do I have remaining?
Well, we said like 1,400 for the gun and the board, right?
Yeah, I'm at an even 13.
Then,
I'm at an even 1,400 so I have $600 left, and I just got the plyos, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So
So like
I don't think
500.
I don't think the display screen is that much, but anyways, doesn't matter because I'm not going to need much more here. We're going the weighted baseballs, but I only am going to buy the 4, 6, and 7.
No love for the 11 right there. Whoa.
No love for the 9 either.
I thought that was the Colt special, the 11 ounce. That was how to get layback right away.
No. These, and I'm buying these not because of velocity building, but because of command work. So let's say you take the 4 ounce, a regular baseball, and a 6 ounce, and you go and start playing catch, and if anybody's ever played catch with one person with 3 baseballs before, you catch this one, throw this one, right? Move it over, you catch this one, throw this one. You do that with a 4, 5, and 6, right? And you play catch in a more variable way. That's a really, really good way to work on command training, right? Being able to adapt to different weights and still hit your target when you don't know what weight is coming your way. So I'm going to say that's about maybe $50, and we're going to, for just 3 of them, all right? Let's say like $15 a piece, even though it might not even be that much, right? And we'll throw that on top.
That's a good investment.
So now I have, where was I at?
What you got about like 450 left, right?
Okay, let's
that's
just
that's all right. So I've got
actually
I'm still
550.
looking at like
550. I
grand.
just did it in my head. 550. I got 550 left.
I am gonna kind of shift gears on this a little bit as far as what you need for feedback. Well, I'm gonna go with what you need to just be emotionally in tune or mentally in tune, and I'm gonna say get like a $150 Bluetooth speaker. There's nothing more degrading than just throwing in a park by yourself, listening to your own thoughts. And I'm thinking about prolonged levels of training. Like, I can't believe how much game presentation impacts the game itself. Like, some of my favorite fields that I've played on have nothing to do with the field, but it has everything to do with the people in the control room working the sound and doing the announcing. So for that purpose, if I get to be my own control room operator for my own throwing sessions, I want to be able to have that freedom. And I think about just boosting the overall morale of, let's say that you're not the only person throwing. Like, I can think of numerous times that Evan and I are working out or getting our throwing in, and we would have something going. It was all the time. That was the way that it worked. I mean, when we're living in our apartment, that was the way that it was. So I think that kind of doubles as you being like a desirable clubhouse guy, because every clubhouse has a speaker that typically gets traveled around. So I hesitate putting that ahead of actual training implements, because I understand that that's more of an exclusive individual type of training thing. I think that I would maybe suggest replacing it with like a really good pair of headphones, assuming if that is, you could assume that you already have those, and that's not really a baseball thing. But let's say that you didn't already have them. I would say get a nice pair of headphones for more than just training purposes, but for travel, for when you need to lock yourself in for your workouts. But for the purpose of this, I'll go with the speaker. And now I'm looking at, let's call it 1,300. We'll get a nice speaker. We'll go 1,300 in the bank now.
I like that choice. I think that's a good choice. I'm not going to go speaker because I'll listen to silence on full blast the whole time. I will listen to silence on full blast because I want it as non-stimulating as possible. Let me do all of that in my own head.
I mean, I respect it.
But I also respect the speaker thing because, if you're training over COVID by yourself, it can lag on. Let's see. So I have a radar gun and a display screen. I have a set of plyos, and I have I have 3 weighted baseballs. I think the next thing that I would buy would be a pull-up band. Not a J band.
Yeah. Hey, well done. Hey, my guy.
Not a J band. Yes, like that. A little a thicker one, but not a J band. Just a little bit thicker. Not a J band. Not a set of crossovers, but a pull-up band, because I can stretch with that. I can do arm care with that. I can do any kind of I can do resistance training, other random things with that as well. So I'm gonna go with a pull-up band because it's pretty versatile.
That's juicy. I respect that move. I would say you're actually inspiring me to make my next couple selections, and I'll start rattling these off. I'd match you with the full set of plyos, just because that's not just for throwing purposes, but you can do upward tosses, you can do side lying movements. You could do general shoulder strengthening implements of using it as just a weight that you can hold. I would match you with the pull-up band. I would go one of the red thinner ones, because you can use those for band pull-aparts, and you can do a whole series that I really like doing for post-throw purposes. And then I would say one of the thicker green ones, the same type of thing, a pull-up band, but green ones, I could remember I liked putting it onto a fence post And my issues when I was pitching, oftentimes my weight would shift forward. I had a tough time keeping my weight back, especially when I would get tired or if I was at the length of a season of I really needed to stay disciplined to stay in my rotation, particularly where my slot was. So I started working with a green band of putting it into my hips, almost wearing it like a belt. Of it kept me focused on where I needed to feel my rotation. And on top of this, I know just purposes in the weight room of I would do banded pullbacks to really feel what I wanted my glove to feel as I was trying to just get this and stay closed, keep my weight back. So I think more of just mechanical feel. I think the implements of having some degree of resistance training and a red one and a green one, those were the staples that I always carried. So I'll fill up the budget as well. I'll say the mini trampoline just as far as I really enjoyed that as a post throw of opening up the blood flow and getting the reset there. So I know I'm rattling off a few, the plyos, the pull up bands, the two of them, and then the mini trampoline to go with the plyos. So we mentioned on an earlier episode me carrying the furniture dolly. This is pretty much everything that I filled up the furniture dolly with.
So what? How many dollars are you at?
That's, I admit, I'm all right. Crossover 400, 300, 400, 350. Shoulder tube, plyos 500. Mini trampoline 6. Speaker, let's call that 800. Pull up bands
$200 speaker.
So I'm. No, I was caught in the rounding. I was rounding the numbers in my head. So let's go 100 to 150. I think that's reasonable, and that thing's gonna last a while.
That's
your career's gonna last a while. That's the goal. So 100 to 150. So that leaves me with about 1100. Which the easy thing. All right, I guess I probably would fill it with a radar gun at this point in time. The easy move would be to do that. I would personally go just from financial prowess. If I had 2,000, I would fill it with a stalker. Like I would do exactly what you would do. I'm going to add a couple small things that I like. I would add an iPhone tripod to be able to take video if I want it. That's 20 to 30 bucks. That's not a huge investment. I would probably get a decent water bottle just because that's good to have. That turns the morale around. And then I'm trying to think of just time management things if you needed to hit the reset and just be able to breathe. I would then probably get a pair of sunglasses too, just because I like putting those on. I don't know if that counts. Well, not when I throw, though. That's a good point. I was always superstitious about not wearing sunglasses until I was done throwing. But I would do, assuming that I was at a financial cap, let's say I was approaching where it was, that's pretty much everything that I would put into a package of that's kind of everything that I did use, I suppose. I would, if I was financially restricted, I would get the pocket radar. And I say that because I would prefer to use the stalker, but I think about the accessibility of if all I need is a general approximation, I think that's a pretty good alternative to do it with. I'm not trying to say that it's valid or it has the weight that a stalker does. And I mean, again, if you're spending that kind of money on a legit gun, you know that it isn't being deceiving at all. I know the tests that I've seen, it gets pretty close. It's relatively a pretty consistent gun, and that's their pro model that will speak the read back to you was I think it's like 350 if I'm not mistaken, and they have the board that comes with it. So that would be, I think you could do that for under 500. I get that it's not as accurate of a measure. I hesitate saying this because again, I would follow your lead, but for the purposes of, let's say I was hitting that ceiling, that's probably the alternative that I would go with.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Pocket radars are perfect. I have a pocket and a stalker. So like my brother will hang on to the pocket and I'll hang on to the Stalker Pro. And bringing the stalker to wherever we're throwing is a whole different thing because I have a tripod. I have to take it out, set it up, put it on the tripod, and then get somebody's phone, hook it up to where it can announce the velo, but that's useful feedback. And I will say that I'm still not done with my $2,000. I have a few more things I need to buy. So next, I'm going to buy a tape measure. And I'm going to buy one of the tape measures with a wheel.
That's good.
I'm going to buy two. I'm going to buy one that's a pull, like a pull it out so you can measure 60 feet 6. And then I'm going to buy one with the wheel so you can measure distance in like an open grass field. And I'll for sure have 2 tape measures so I know how far, how hard, right? And what's going on with that. And I'll put my phone to the
That's a
ground,
good one.
whatever, video, stuff like that. But as long as I have know where I'm at and how hard I'm throwing, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need any more data related
Yeah.
things.
That's a respectable move. I mean, that's a veteran type of, you're getting serious when you go to Home Depot and you pull that out. Um, I'm thinking the things that I would add to my budget, whatever is left, first I would get a net, like one of the tension net tab, just in case to throw into that on a given day. A good one's probably going to be around 100, but that one will last you quite a while. I think about that leaves nothing to chance of I would keep it in my car. And if for whatever reason I was having a long day and maybe it's 8 p.m. and I haven't thrown yet, well, I know that I at least have something that I can throw into, and I know that it's not gonna. During COVID, I had a bunch of beat up baseballs that I just threw into a chain link fence. Well, after about a month or two of doing that, those baseballs were in rough shape. So I think the alternative of when you start getting some nicer baseballs, you don't exactly want to throw those into the chain link to beat those up.
Yeah,
So I would invest there. I think that's probably a reasonable one. And
that'd be
then
a good
I
one.
would yeah, I think that kind of just creates I mean it alleviates some concern. And then what else I would spend would be just in case I need to get clever with maybe I don't have a field that's going to be accommodating because theoretically at this point if I have all of this, I could take this to an empty plot of grass and get everything done that I would need. I would then the new things that I would get would probably be Home Depot related. Like I
Yeah.
would get, I know I'll add this, the stick mobility, the orange sticks that can do like a lot of T-spine open up. I would actually probably add one of those as one of my last selections. I know that this isn't a good replacement, but I had my PVC pipe that I put my shoulder tube in. I would try to use that as like a stick mobility thing, but that doesn't simulate the real thing at all.
I
I
think that
started
was
using the real one. I'm
perfect.
like, this is awesome.
What's
It was
different about the real
decent.
one?
I mean, it's more I don't want to slander that company because I actually really do respect what they do. I don't want to suggest I mean, there's the gym that I currently go to right now. They have a very like high dexterity PVC pipe that's blue, and it gets a similar job done. I get that it isn't as durable, and again, I don't want to slander the Stick Mobility company because I actually do admire their work and all the research that they put into it. I also saw somebody making a shoulder tube. We were playing in college when we saw this. There was a PVC pipe with duct tape and tennis balls that they taped to the ends of it, and then you just saw like a whole roll of tape used to keep the tennis balls on this thing, and then they taped a handle on it. That was their shoulder tube. That's how they got it done. So I understand, if you're in a pinch, it's cool to see how you can be an innovator to create these things, and that's something that I really wanted to kind of insert into this discussion. I also understand, this was kind of on a separate rate, but when Kobe Bryant launched his publishing company, he started releasing children's books, and he said that he wanted to have really good hardcover books because when a kid grabs this, they're going to feel like they're holding on to something that has some serious value and it's invested into their development. I think in a similar parallel of if you have the real shoulder tube, if you have the real crossover bands, I understand that this is kind of a perception type of thing, but the point being, you're not going to take a Ferrari into Big O tires to get just a generic oil change. If you're going to invest into this, no disrespect to Big O tires. That just came into my head. Point being, you're not going to just put whatever gas in. I know I'm turning this into just product, just demoralizing. I'm not trying to deflate anybody with this, but the point being, you're not going to fuel your body with the $1.50 hot dog special at Costco every day if you're a high level athlete. And I think for the same reasons, if you have the opportunity to kind of up whatever it is that you currently have, I don't want to say this to push people away from the game itself because I'm all about growing the game and I don't want people to feel like they need to have the top of the line things to get it done. But I think about a good message on this is the reason that I use a 44 glove is because it's a little bit more inexpensive. It's still a very quality leather, but I can use that money instead to invest into something that's going to make me feel like I am more prepared to throw rather than just a really flashy pair of leather that I can carry around. And I think in the same capacity, that was how I invested into my cleats of, instead of buying the next brand new pair of cleats, I've got a pair, it gets the job done, it feels good on my feet, and I'm going to spend that money instead on the crossover cords that I do have. So I understand that's not really on the cap of the 2000 that we set, but my concern about this is that it's going to divide people into thinking that you need to have these really nice things in order to be a high level player. You don't need to have that. Mariano Rivera used a cardboard glove. Like that's what he used to get the job done, and you see where he got it ended up. But I think as far as having a good level feel, I do recognize that, the feel of a genuine thing in your hand is very difficult to replicate. And I also understand it's all perception based too. Maybe it's just me kind of being a diva when it comes to everything that I'm used to.
Well, let me be the voice for the other side, as saying
Yeah.
you don't need to have, because I think differently, right, than Justin thinks, just like how everybody thinks differently. I don't think you need to have the shoulder tube. I think you can achieve the same effect in different ways. Not by turning something into a shoulder tube, but by doing an exercise that achieves the same goals, right? I don't think you need a set of J bands. I think you maybe want something that's like a resistance band, because the price is different, right? And I know I spent more money than Wick did on my set of stuff, but that was because of one particular item. And I would say that, just to attest to kind of what I'm saying, the last part of my money would go into buying lumber and a strip of turf, because I will build a portable mound.
That's good.
So I can take it to whatever field I need to. I can measure the distance, know how far 60 feet 6 inches is. I can put up my radar gun, and I can throw a full-on professional style bullpen using $2,000, where I don't need, I don't need the real thing of whatever they have, because a lot of things that I feel like players need is something they can do on their own, or just something less. A lot of the mobility exercises I would do freestanding, not with a lot of tools, right? And it's different between me and Justin, whereas like Justin would feel that way about that, and I would feel this way about, how to train with less stuff or less of the branded things. But it's personal preference, right? So that, I guess that's kind of what we're seeing now as we look at what we chose to take as our equipment. Less how we're going to use it, and more what we feel we need to be successful.
More how it's going to simulate the actual feel of what it is that we want to accomplish, and how are we going to take the best version of ourselves into whatever it is that we're looking to go after. And, I think that's cool. I'll also say this with the disclaimer of, you are playing far longer than I am, so I should probably follow your lead on pretty much all of this first and foremost. But I think that it's really interesting to follow this along, and I think part of the reason that I was almost hesitant to share my perspective on this is because I didn't want anybody to think that this was a very exclusive way of playing the game. Yes, there are a lot of ways to go about this, but I never wanted baseball to be a materialistic practice, just because I want this game to belong to everybody that needs the access to do what they need to do. So I think I kind of have some predispositions involved with, what I did when I was younger. I was a baseball player and I was a musician, and I would sit down at a piano, and the one that I currently have is, I don't know, it's like $150 keyboard, and the keys on itself, they're not very good, but it gets the job done. And I think to myself, I would be playing a lot more if I had something that was a lot more of a good feel, more of an elaborate setup. And I think that it motivated me to throw when I felt that presence of, you're getting ready to do this. This is what you've committed into it. And that was how I created that construction. But at the same time, to support your side of this, of really, I think the number one bit of feedback that you need is that radar gun that tells you this is what you are putting together. And I mean, you can't replace material things with that one concrete number. So yes, you're spending that much fixed amount on that gun, but you're not spending it on the material. You're spending it on what it is, the output that it's giving you. And that's an invaluable tool that I think objectivity as a baseball player is so much more valuable than any asset that you can hold in your hand in many respects, almost across the board. So I support your side of this. The more we talk about this, the more I start just soul searching myself, realizing that I probably should just follow your lead. So I don't want to sound like I'm just caving on this, but you have extremely good rationale on all of this.
I think what this comes back to in my head, and what I really believe, is if you gave a kid one baseball and you gave him one radar gun and you said, throw this ball at that fence until you can throw it, and this radar gun says 95 miles per hour. Do that every day for multiple years, and I promise you'll get there as long as you stay dedicated to just trying to throw that hard. And I think that's just kind of what you need is yourself. You don't need the brand. You don't need people to sell you those kinds of things. You need yourself and a way to evaluate your progress. And that would be, if I could purchase one thing, it would be that. It's a pocket or a stalker.
You know, if these companies are publicly traded, well, hopefully we're going to just up their stock right there. You never know how that's going to play out. You know, it's fun to follow. And I think that this is, I mean, a big ulterior reason for why we wanted to create this show to begin with, is because the accessibility of the game, I think, is really, I mean, it's an active concern of mine when you recognize how exclusive the Little League uniforms are getting and how much money is getting poured into. I remember when I was 11 years old, we had screen printed t-shirts, we rush ordered hats, and we went out and beat the hell out of everybody. And it was so gratifying because that was the message that we had at 11 years old of, yeah, these are screen printed t-shirts. We're absolutely dominating the custom teams with banners on the back and matching bags and everything that went into that. And I think that was a very pivotal moment of my development when I really recognized the value of just simply getting the job done. And you can't replicate and you can't substitute the authentic thing of objectivity, just like you mentioned. So I support it, man. I mean, that's what it's there for. That's what people need to be getting on if you're not on it at this point. So my biggest bit of encouragement, again, listen to the active minor leaguer when it comes to putting this together. There's a reason he's in the position that he's in. And I mean, it's fun to follow. And I think that especially as you recognize that these things are, if you commit just a little bit of a potential budget that you do have into something, it's amazing how one thing can have such a big impact on so many people. So, you know, I think that's cool too. I think it's also cool if you have a group of people that you can kind of pool it together. I know that requires a lot of coordination, but I think it's awesome when you get like 5 or 6 guys together and like a set time. And I saw this during COVID too, of, you know, people that lived together that were practicing social distancing, of, you know, all of a sudden people are pooling these things together, and it was really amazing to see the resources that came out of it. So, Evan, I think this just means I need to move to Iowa, man. I think that'll solve all of my issues right there.
You stay where it's warm, dude. You do not want to come try to train up here. I promise.
Oh, my goodness. That's true. You can't buy the sunshine. I forget about that.
I'll come to you. You don't come here. I'll come to you. That's how we'll do it.
That's the way we can get it done. I am all good with that, man. Evan, I know we've covered plenty right here. You got any final thoughts for us?
I mean, whatever makes you feel good, but just know that it's not the tools you buy, it's what's in your head and what's in your heart that's going to get the job done.
That's beautiful, man. I couldn't said it any better myself right there. There we go. Well, I know what makes me feel good, and it's making episodes with the absolute legend Evan Johnson right here, and we keep having an absolute blast as we get it rolling. Evan, my friend, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. For everybody that's tuning in to Night Pitch episode 7. We've got some special guests joining us later in the week. We've got the Christmas holiday season approaching. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Make sure you guys are practicing good provisions if for whatever reason you're putting yourself in a dangerous setting where maybe baseball throws aren't the traditional norm. You never know what it is. I think we need to actually end this episode with a disclaimer of we don't encourage anybody doing absolutely outrageous with their throwing. So please be safe, especially if there's glass windows in empty Iowa towns somewhere. So hopefully we can keep it safe. My friends, thank you for tuning in. Night Pitch episode 7. He's Evan Johnson. I'm Justin Wick. We will see you guys next time. You know, I was thinking as far as like the crazy provisions of getting your throwing taken care of. It reminded me our previous discussion talking about like delays and crazy things that have happened during games. It came to mind of a summer league game that I was playing in, and it was an 11 a.m. start. There was about 2,000 elementary school kids at kids camp. They just showed up at the field.
I was there for this. I remember
really
this.
Fun. Yeah, that's true. Really fun environments. So this is more for the people tuning in rather than Evan, but it was the tornado siren test day. So there's not a cloud in the sky. It's a beautiful day. Everybody's having a great time at the park. And Kyle Richardson from Texas A&M is our starting pitcher. It's about the third inning, and all of a sudden we start hearing the tornado siren just blaring. Now, for context here, the tornado siren is directly next to the right field foul pole.
Yeah, it's like right there.
This thing is screaming. So I feel bad that I didn't mention this is one of my favorite delays. But anyways, this thing goes off, and Kyle's on the mound, and he's taking it like a champ. But mind you, it's kids' day at the park. There are 2,000 screaming elementary school kids thinking there's a tornado in this blue sky all over the place. I don't think the PA announcer made an announcement, so everybody was still clueless if you didn't know what was going on. But that was one of my favorites. I think that he had a couple good moments, but that one, seeing him walk back, he got back on the bus after the game, and he's just shaking his head.
Don't forget that it was like 100 degrees. It was a day game, and it was like
on a turf mound.
Yeah, it was hot, like really hot. And these kids are screaming at the same time as the tornado siren. And Kyle's like, there's like one out. There's a guy on first, and he's like doing long holds, but there's kids screaming. He's like checking the runner at first. There's a tornado siren wailing and kids screaming. It was. I remember sitting in the dugout like, this is the most brutal thing I've ever seen.
Oh, dude. Well, I remember it was, for some reason, we had a scheduled doubleheader of, we played on the road at 11 a.m. and then we played at home at 6 p.m. So we drove down to drive back to play another game against the same team at a different ballpark that day. So I remember everybody went into this game just thinking to themselves, like, man, this is kind of brutal travel. But you know what? It is what it is. We're going to do it. So this was what started the day. So everybody's just like, it was one of those where you're just embracing the misery, and it just turned into you're just laughing uncontrollably as it was happening. But you know, the worst part, he was a starter. Like, he planned his entire week to do this. And now all of a sudden it's been 7 days, and it just so happened to come right now. It's just a disaster, man.
Well, in between the whole time with the PA guy, it's like you're pitching. If you've never been to a kid's day, it's SpongeBob SquarePants songs and Frozen songs and like all that stuff on repeat. So these kids are all just wailing it, like every single one of them. So he's pitching, and like in between pitches, they're like playing the SpongeBob SquarePants song, and it's louder than that stadium's been in probably forever, because you just got 1,000, 2,000 kids just screaming these songs while you're pitching. It's a whole different thing to pitch on a kid's day. It really is.
I didn't mean to, like, stick on this one game in particular, but this just came to mind of, they had like a party area right next to the visitors' dugout at this game, and for some reason there was like 7 or 8 just 50-year-old dudes just pounding beers at this exact game. Like, it's 11 o'clock on a Wednesday in the middle of July. So like the entire dynamic, this was one of those that you're getting the post-game spread after the game, and mind you, there's still elementary school kids running around because you can't just clear out 2,000 of them. Well, and then we got back on a bus to drive back to the field to maybe breathe for like an hour and then play the night game. I remember our starting pitcher for the night game didn't have to go to the day game, so he was just like, "Oh, how was it?" And like, how do we explain to him everything that happened today?
That whole scenario. It's just like you can't really explain that to that guy. How'd the day go? So yeah, Kyle pitched. It was 116 degrees. It's burning hot. It's kid's day, and the tornado siren went off for one of his half innings.
Well, the night went into extras. So I remember this game, we were just like, this game won't end. We were losing going into the bottom of the ninth, and we scored 2 runs in the ninth inning to keep the game going on. So it was one of these that were just like, all right, we don't want to lose. Like, yeah, we'll put up a fight. But it was one of these, like, if there's one game that doesn't go into extras, could it be the game after the 118-degree humid day on the turf mound? Oh, my goodness.
You know, 2 games in the same day, and then driving hours in between to get to the second game to play the same team, and then it goes into extras on a day when it's just incredibly hot. That's brutal.
I remember we were sitting in the bullpen, and we were just turning into laughing about it. That's a good time, man. You know what you're going to run into.
No, you really don't.